Okay, we're on the air. Welcome to the Florida Civic Advance webinar, third Thursday webinar on Civic Scholarship meets Civic Practice. These webinars are a way for us to showcase examples of civic excellence in Florida communities. I'm Bob Jones, Florida Civic Advance board member, and we are a nonprofit 501c3 membership network in Florida, committed to working across sectors to improve and advance the civic health in Florida's communities. The civic challenge for Florida is, as the third largest state in the country, we rank among the weakest states in terms of civic health, covering such things as volunteering, helping neighbors, voting, fixing a community problem. We want to change that. And we have established a framework over the coming 3 years and established strategic priorities. And we're interested in supporting the civic health and community measurement and convening and showcasing civic excellence examples and serving our members in their civic efforts.
Just speaking.
So we welcome you to join us in this effort, and the membership information is on the screen at the moment, but it's also on our website, both the benefits and application. So in terms of just housekeeping, questions as you have them during the presentation, we will try and keep track of those, and please use the chat for those, and as well as any resources that might be useful in the context and related to civic scholarship and civic practice. Please feel free to offer those, and we'll have the record of this meeting up on our website within a day or so for review, including the chat information. And we are recording this so that people that were unable to join us will be able to review this and see this at a later point. I'm honored to introduce our presenters. We have Dr. Robin Bakken, who was the founder of the University of Miami Office of Civic and Community Engagement. She serves as Assistant Provost for Civic and Community Engagement and is the Charlton W. Tabu Associate Professor of History and Senior Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education. She received her bachelor's from Brandeis University, summa cum laude, in history. She received her master's and PhD degrees from the University of Michigan. She is a published and award-winning author of books and articles, including the book Building the South Side, Urban Space and Civic Culture in Chicago, 1890 to 1919. Big Bosses, a working girl's memoir of the Jazz Age. And she is, in a forthcoming book, a co-editor of Engaging Places, Engaging Practices, Urban History, and Campus Community Collaboration. She's a national leader in promoting the civic engagement in higher education, has been recognized and awarded by Campus Compact and other national organizations. And she has secured over $2.5 million for work in the research and projects that the office has engaged in affordable housing, urban resilience, and equity in community development in South Florida. So welcome, Robin. I'm going to introduce the two other presenters. Jim Murley perhaps needs no introduction, but he is the Chief Resilience Officer for Miami-Dade County and is the president currently of the Florida Civic Advance Board. So Jim has had over four decades of public service in working on civic issues and public policy. Among other things, he founded 1,000 Friends of Florida, where he is broadcasting from at this moment in Tallahassee. Served as secretary of the Florida Department of Community Affairs, chaired the Florida Energy and Climate Commission, and served for 10 years at Florida Atlantic University, overseeing research on urban and environmental issues. And he is a fellow at the National Academy of Public Administration. Alec Chow serves as a strategic planning and performance analyst at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. He was a recent University of Miami graduate, graduating in 2022, and he received a BA in History and International Relations. He has served as station manager and director of programming for WVUM 90.5, The Voice in Miami. And we welcome him as well to this. He is coming to us from Washington, D.C. So, Robin, I'm going to stop the share and you can begin your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just gonna start the share now. Okay, well, thank you so much, Bob, for inviting me to speak as part of the Florida Civic Advance webinar series. It's an honor to be with you all. I'd also like to thank my co-presenters, Jim Murley, who's been a longtime colleague and collaborator and friend, and also Alec Chow, a former student. It's so great to see our students have such success working as an analyst at HUD. So as Bob mentioned, I'm an urban and environmental historian, and my work really looks at the interactions between the natural and built environments and planning, building, and design decisions that have shaped city form historically and also that inform present-day planning practice. And it's these interactions between history and present day public policy and practice that led me to create the Office of Civic and Community Engagement at UM in 2011. So the mission of our office is to enhance university community collaborations by engaging the university's vast academic resources in the enrichment of civic and community life at the local, national, and global levels. And we really aim to promote a model of engagement that's based on a culture of collaboration and an ethic of reciprocity, so that we are recognizing the importance of diverse forms of knowledge creation. And our goal in doing this work is to develop teaching and research strategies that directly link academic scholarship to public practice, hence the title of today's talk. Because we know that initiatives that connect the intellectual work of the university with the public at large help students see firsthand how to translate their academic knowledge into real-world problem-solving skills and the promotion of civic health. And Alec will talk a little bit about that in a moment from a student perspective. So we also know that when we're talking about civic health, whether it's in the state of Florida or in Miami-Dade County, that Miami typically ranks very low compared to other major metropolitan regions. In fact, at the time of the founding of our office, a major national study that was done of the top 50 metropolitan regions in the nation ranked Miami last in civic health. Just for your knowledge, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis-St. Paul, was ranked first, and there's a whole host of reasons why that is, but suffice it to say that both the state of Florida and Miami-Dade County consistently rank low in measures of civic health. And so Bob mentioned what some of these measures are, right? Rates of voluntarism, the frequency of informal exchanges with neighbors, use of the news media, membership in voluntary organizations, voter turnout. In all of these measures of civic health and well-being, Miami ranks very low. And so here's some recent data from 2019 from the Fry Center at the University of Central Florida that compares all of these major indicators of civic health at the national level, at the state level, and in Miami-Dade County, Miami-Dade County being the green bar. So just a quick survey shows you that Florida fairly consistently ranks lower than the US as a whole, and Miami-Dade County frequently ranks lower than the state of Florida, right? So we really do need to reinvigorate the civic health of our local community in South Florida and also of the state if we do intend to provide a robust form of democratic engagement in the work that we do. So that is the mission of the Office of Civic and Community Engagement. It's to think about how engaged scholarship can reinvigorate democracy and civic well-being at all levels. And we focus on two main areas, both community-based research as well as community-engaged learning. So for community-based research, we encourage faculty to incorporate work that is directly responsive to community needs, that involves community in the research model itself, and that fosters this process of knowledge co-creation across the university with community partners. Similarly, in our pedagogy, we aim to have faculty build community-based learning into the curriculum so that we are creating models of learning that foster mutually beneficial collaboration between the university and the community to promote positive social change. So we want courses that promote the interrelationship of teaching, research, and service through theory, action, and reflection, that develop and translate academic knowledge and critical thinking into civic responsibility, that foster mutually beneficial collaborations between the university and community, that incorporate reflection. This is a key component of effective community-based learning, as that also outline engaged learning objectives in the course curriculum itself, right? So that it's not tangential to course learning, but in fact is essential to what students learn in their courses. And we know through research at the national level that community-based learning is overall effective for student development and student learning. We know that it enhances what students learn in the classroom by being able to directly apply classroom knowledge to the real world. We also know that this type of pedagogy fosters professional development and career exploration. Students have the opportunity to work with community partners and often see different potential career trajectories as a result of the work that they're doing in community-based classroom learning. It enhances personal development and psychosocial well-being because students see themselves as accountable to somebody other than their professor or their parents. Now they're working with a community group that is relying on them to help build capacity, to help address a real world problem. And it creates that sense of accountability for them, oftentimes in their first semester freshman year. We also know that we're meeting immediate community needs. And clearly in the state of Florida and in Miami-Dade County, we have very real community needs. And I'll talk about some of those in a minute. It also fosters exposure to new populations and settings for our students, right? Here in Miami, even though we're the University of Miami, we are not actually in the city of Miami. We are in the planned suburb of Coral Gables. So many of our students know Coral Gables very well. They might know South Beach very well. They might know certain sections of Miami, but doing this community-based work exposes them to new populations. It also helps foster civic responsibility. We want our students to know that their education is not just instrumental in helping them get a job, but their education is an essential part of them being responsible contributors to a vibrant democracy. And experiential learning helps with that. And then developing awareness of community issues, just knowing what are the main issues in your community locally, because in most instances, those local issues translate into both national and global issues as well. So we've developed a number of programs that help foster this sense of engagement, both among our students and among our faculty, and that deeply embed civic learning into our teaching and our research. So one of those is the Civic Scholars Program. This is a program that the Office of Civic and Community Engagement manages in collaboration with the Butler Center for Service and Leadership. So this program is designed for students who want to showcase their civic capacity and be directly involved in both courses and co-curricular activities in the community. So for this program, students take 4 courses that have a community-based learning component. And I should add that in our undergraduate curriculum, we have over 600 courses that have community-based learning components. So that means that this isn't targeted to any particular school or college or major or discipline. Any student can be a civic scholar, and they will find community-based learning courses within their department. They also participate in a capstone project where they work directly with a community partner in order to help build capacity and address a specific need. They do a reflection workshop their senior year and turn in an entire portfolio of their work, and then final presentations of learning. And so we've had a number of different capstone projects. These are just a handful that you can see here. Students helping prepare for LSAT, providing materials to fellow students, doing patient advocacy in the pre-med curriculum, working on an international students guide, focusing on volunteer retention for some of our local not-for-profits, and also developing a guide for participants to develop leadership skills. Again, just some examples of the projects that our students have done as civic scholars. We also developed the Civic Engagement High School Partnership with a public high school in South Dade. So this was a school that at the time of our founding was labeled a failing school. And so we worked with the superintendent of Dade County Public Schools to do a curricular enhancement program in the humanities. So our Civic Engagement High School partnership with Miami Southridge High School, which is now, by the way, an A school, not a failing school, focuses on having undergraduate students with majors in history and English work with partner teachers at Southridge to enhance the curriculum, give guest lectures, but also mentor the students around creating a college-going culture at Southridge High School. And so that means talking with them about what it takes to get into college, helping them write college essays. We do a campus visit every semester so that Southridge students can meet with admissions officers, financial aid officers, student leaders to really see themselves in college and understand strategies to be effective applicants. And one of our greatest successes was that we had a student from Southridge who participated in the Southridge partnership in one of her classes at Southridge. She really didn't think college was for her. She ended up being part of this partnership. She did a campus visit. Needless to say, she got a full scholarship to went on to become a biomedical engineer. And when she was at she was actually one of the students who went back to Southridge to participate in the partnership. And I have to say, this is not just a recruiting tool for we are overall just encouraging students to think about themselves and see themselves in college. And so this is the ultimate goal of the partnership. Then for faculty, we run an Engaged Faculty Fellows program. So this is a competitive program where the provost provides summer stipends to faculty of $2,500 each who create courses that have a significant community engaged learning component within them. So the faculty participate in a 6-part workshop where we talk about the pedagogy of engagement, how you build reflection into your work, how you select community partners, how you do assessments in community engaged courses. And again, just like with the Civic Scholars, we've had faculty from every school and college at the university. So that ranges from the Frost School of Music to the College of Engineering to Arts and Sciences, Architecture, the School of Education. And one of the things that faculty has found is, in addition to the benefits of participating in the workshop and what they learn in the workshop, it's being engaged very deeply over the course of a year with faculty from other disciplines with whom they usually don't get to talk, that is one of the values that they find, that kind of peer-to-peer mentorship that is one of the most valuable components. So by engaging more directly with the community, universities not only bring their skills and resources to the public, but also transform the process of knowledge production. And that's how we can address some of our most pressing social problems in ways that are collaborative and reciprocal. And as I mentioned, Miami has many pressing social problems. Indeed, as I'm sure most of you know, Miami is seen as ground zero for 2 of the country's most pressing issues: housing affordability, as well as climate change. So I'm sure many of you have seen the headlines, and some of you may have lived it, that this year Miami was rated the least affordable housing market in the country. So it's made national headlines. Our mayor, Daniela Vincava, declared a housing emergency and put in place a number of programs and offices to address this issue. We've seen rents in Miami in just 1 year go up 35%. And since the start of the pandemic, mortgage prices have risen close to 60%. So again, we need to address these issues in a comprehensive, holistic way. And compounding this vulnerability is the city's location in a coastal zone, which brings, of course, ever increasing climate risks, the focus of Jim Murley's day job when he's not participating in webinars. Indeed, Miami-Dade County's sea level rise strategy notes that Miami's sea levels have risen 9 inches since 1930, but there's a projected additional 2 feet of sea level rise by 2060. We also know that the pressures of both the housing and climate crises are most acutely felt by vulnerable populations at the neighborhood level. And so with that in mind, one of the major projects of the Office of Civic and Community Engagement has been the development of the Miami Housing Solutions Lab, which is a suite of interactive online mapping tools that utilize big data and civic tech to visualize the landscape of housing affordability and climate impacts in South Florida. So over the years of doing these projects, we've developed a number of innovative policy recommendations and toolkits that are designed to be used in collaboration with elected officials, municipalities, policy practitioners like Jim, as well as advocacy groups. We also developed a housing policy timeline so that people could understand the history of housing policy and the ways in which it's impacted present day conditions. We created a project called Land Access for Neighborhood Development, or LAND, which maps all of the vacant or underutilized property in Miami-Dade County that's owned by a public entity, a civic institution, or a faith-based organization. The idea being that if you look at a map and see vacant land owned by different jurisdictions that is right next to each other in close proximity, you could aggregate that land to build affordable housing on it. And then the centerpiece of our mapping work is the Miami Affordability Project, or MAP. So this is an interactive, publicly accessible technology for visualizing neighborhood level housing market dynamics and developing data-driven strategies for community development. So on this tool, there are over 300 different data filters. It's fully interactive. This is just a screenshot that is showing you cost burden by census tract, as well as where there is existing public and subsidized housing. So those census tracts that are red mean that 75 to 100% of households in those census tracts are cost burdens, meaning they pay 30% or more of their income on housing. What you see on the dots, the magenta dots are public housing, the purple dots are subsidized housing. So just a very quick glance shows you that, not surprisingly, there's a concentration of affordable housing in the urban core. But when you go further west, there's still a great deal of need, but not as much as access to housing affordability. So this was really the goal of this mapping platform, is to aggregate massive amounts of data and make it easily accessible by visualizing it. And we work in collaboration with our Institute for Data Science and Computing to do all of this mapping work. We've also incorporated climate change data into this tool. So you can visualize flood, projected storm surge, projected sea level rise as elevation in concert with our existing housing affordability data. And this is the first analytic tool that brings together both housing affordability data as well as climate data, maps it and visualizes it. So here what you're seeing is projected sea level rise. You can see also where that projected sea level rise is going to be impacting our affordable housing. The latest work that we've done around climate equity, which we just launched in December, focuses on the impacts of extreme heat. And we know through our data analysis that there's a direct correlation between neighborhoods that were historically red lines, where there's been historical disinvestment, typically communities of color, and those that suffer from extreme heat today. So this is just some data visualization that we've done that shows on the left the direct correlation between neighborhoods that were red lines and those that suffer from extreme heat today, as well as the inverse relationship between neighborhoods that have fairly high tree canopy and those that were historically red lines. So we aim to ground equity issues in everything that we do and use data to understand the geography of vulnerability. We also know that extreme heat is directly related to community health. And so we're looking at the public health implications of extreme heat and the kinds of strategies that can be used in order to address it. So tree canopy obviously is one, building typology, including the age of a building, as well as building materials, the location of various facilities like cooling centers, and we've mapped all of the cooling centers in the county, as well as roof type. And Jim's office, under the Chief Heat Officer, Jane Gilbert, also produced a extreme heat toolkit to help residents understand the impacts of extreme heat. And we worked directly in collaboration with them when we were doing this work. We've made the historical process of displacement a centerpiece of our work. So alongside data analysis, mapping, and policy toolkits, we've examined the history of racial segregation and displacement over the last century in Miami. So we connect historical patterns of racial discrimination and planning practice to modern disparities caused by things like gentrification and issues related to environmental justice. And so this kind of work is the work that I've embedded into my courses, both in urban history and in environmental history. So Alec was part of the two courses that I'm going to just briefly mention here, and then he can talk more about them. In my Cities in American History course, students utilize both traditional and innovative tools for conducting historical research and presenting that research to the public in a way that's accessible. So students did oral histories, engaged in local archival research, and created an ArcGIS story map. This is a screenshot of the title here, but again, fully accessible online and interactive, where students met with community organizations, conducted oral histories, and incorporated those voices into this project, in addition to archival research and historical documents. So I'm going to let Alec talk a little bit about that process, but they basically raised issues related to the history of neighborhood stability, housing, neighborhood displacement and neighborhood change, as well as the threats of climate. Our current work focuses on the idea of climate gentrification. How is climate change, projected storm surge and sea level rise going to impact those neighborhoods in Miami that historically have been marginalized, but also have been at higher elevation? As coastal communities lose their value, areas at higher elevation like Little Haiti increase in value, what kinds of strategies can be put in place to ensure that there isn't yet again another pattern of displacement of vulnerable communities and communities of color? So the Office of Civic and Community Engagements is currently engaged in a grant project called Listening and Learning, Understanding Climate Gentrification Through Community Conversations, where once again, we are doing oral histories. And so students in my environmental history class last year participated in these oral histories with our community partner Catalyst Miami, really addressing some of the ways in which people in Overtown have experienced community change. And our goal is to create a tool called a displacement vulnerability mitigation tool, so that if new developments is coming to a community, neighborhoods can understand what strategies they could use to try to mitigate the impacts on their community, like rising rents, like displacement, like mom and pop stores being put out of business, but also being able to incorporate resilience strategies into infrastructure investment in their communities. The basis of everything that we do and any kinds of work around housing affordability or urban resilience is grounded in community engagement. And so we work, as I mentioned, from the start of any project with grassroots organizations, with policymakers, with elected officials, in order to ensure that we have all of the voices at the table that are directly impacted by the issue, that we take those voices into consideration, that those community partners are an essential feature of the research and scholarship that emerges, that they're paid for their time, and that anything that emerges is a shared project. And so this is really the goal of all of the work that we do, is to think about how universities can really be a vehicle for fostering engagement and robust democratic public spheres by encouraging collaboration, by promoting diversity, by shaping knowledge in a collaborative way, by addressing our community needs, and ultimately educating for citizenship. So we know that by developing teaching, research, and institutional strategies that directly link academic scholarship and teaching to public practice, universities can better fulfill their mandate to produce the next generation of citizens who have the knowledge, skills, and values to be effective civic leaders and reinvigorate our democracy. So this is our contact information. Thank you so much for being part of this webinar. I am going to stop sharing my screen. And now I would like to engage in conversation with Alec to get the student perspective on being in a course where community engagement is a significant feature of the work that the students do. So Alec, from your perspective, having been in both the urban history class and done the story map, and being in the environmental history class and doing the oral histories around climate gentrification, how do you think those projects benefited you as a student and your student learning?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bach, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share my perspective. And thank you to everybody in attendance, to Bob and to Jim for also inviting me to speak. And my primary perspective on the matter is, as a student, and something, Dr. Bakken, that you mentioned, which I think is very important, is as students in university and graduate school, whatever the case may be, there is a pervasive feeling that you are accountable only to either yourself and or your professor. And so much of your work feels like it is accomplishment of an objective, possibly with the purpose of advancing your learning. But I think there is a concern that in American universities that there's something of a disconnection between the institution and the community in which the institution resides. So I think I find myself in a somewhat unique situation among UM students in that I'm actually from South Florida. I lived there my entire life from birth up until the point where I left to come work in DC 6 months ago. So UM was my alma mater, and coming to UM as a student, I felt already some connection and some knowledge of the community in which UM is based in terms of the wider Miami metropolitan area. But like was mentioned previously, there is still that disconnection between where students are reasonably familiar with the area and the whole of Miami and the communities that live therein. So contributing in these courses enabled me to learn more about the communities, especially the marginalized communities in Miami that have become or have been part of its history on an integral level, that I think the loss of that history reflects a general lack of institutional memory within Miami that contributes to some of these notions of poor civic engagement, poor relations among neighbors and among community members, a lack of civil society organization and contribution to public policy compared to other metropolitan areas in the United States. So as a student, it was extremely helpful to have the opportunity to interface with community members in Overtown, to learn more about the history of Coral Gables, of Miami, as they relate to development, but also how race-based displacement contributed to that development, especially in places like Coral Gables, where we know that the Merrick family unfortunately had a very problematic past. So this contributed not only to greater understanding of South Florida's history as a South Florida resident, but also as a history student, the notion of being able to do history, quote unquote, the idea that I am apply my historical knowledge and my ability to think critically, to analyze information that I am presented with and synthesize it to develop conclusions that are also applicable to a variety of disciplines as it relates to climate science, to international affairs, political science, et cetera. And that was extremely enriching to me. The idea that history is not simply this subject that I think is perceived of as being studied in literature, where you are reading about the past and writing papers about the past, but the past is happening now, that we can develop an exact through line from Miami's founding through patterns of racial discrimination and segregation to the way that Miami has developed now and how that's affecting continued development in Miami as Miami and other parts of the United States encounter climate change, housing affordability issues, and so forth. So those are some of just my introductory thoughts, but yeah.
Thanks, Alec. And I wonder, one of the big issues that we always face whenever university is doing community-based work, particularly when there's a legacy and a perception that, the university is this ivory tower, their university researchers and students are coming from a position of privilege and engaging with communities that have often historically been marginalized, is the issue of trust. How do you build trust? How do you facilitate that? How do you make sure that there's an understanding of true collaboration? So one of the things that we did in the environmental history class, you remember with the Overtown Community Champions, is that before any students did any oral histories throughout the entire semester, the students were part of bi-weekly Zoom meetings with the Overtown Community Champions to understand from their perspective what their needs are. And I think that's really important. So could you maybe say a word about how you think that kind of regular participation throughout the entire semester of the Overtown Community Champions meetings enhanced the work in the oral histories and the conversations you're able to have?
Absolutely. The notion of participating in those meetings with the Overtown Community Champions was extremely important to the project because on an anthropological level, when you're speaking with participants in your research, when you are speaking with people who are giving information about their lived experiences on a very intimate level, experiences that could be very painful, you want to ensure that you're being respectful of them as a person, not simply as a research subject or as a piece of data. So allowing us to participate in those meetings, providing benedictions, providing our thoughts on how our weeks were going, listening very intimately to concerns that community members brought in front of the group for discussion, I think allowed us to develop a certain level of familiarity that we would not have had we not participated in those projects. I think it would have inhibited our ability to speak to those community members candidly, to allow them to provide input on their experiences in a way that we felt was beneficial to the project, but also enabled us to develop new questions and seek new insights that, although we had prepared questions and topics to discuss ahead of time, new emergent ideas developed from the discussions held in those meetings that allowed us to gather more granular histories of the experiences that these residents had gone through. So the notion of being embedded within your community and engaging them in the scholarship, not simply as observational subjects, but as active participants in the notion of doing history and of the development of this project, is extremely important.
Great, thank you for that. And also I see that Bea Skokin from Libraries is on the call, and I just want to thank the libraries because they have been crucial in facilitating our work. The Special Collections Division at the University of Miami Libraries has made a commitment to collecting archival material related to grassroots activism in South Florida, and particularly to both climate and affordable housing. Bea helped facilitate all of our oral history work. She helped train our students in oral history protocols, helped us formulate consent agreements so that our community partners were comfortable. And so I think the other key kind of takeaway is, there are many aspects of the university that are essential to help facilitate this work. It's not just the individual professor, it's figuring out who your collaborators are, and making sure that it is really a joint effort. And I just want to ask one last question of Alec before talking with Jim. Alec, you now work for HUD, which is amazing, and we're so proud. And we work very closely with our local Dade County Department of Public Housing and Community Development. So could you say a word about how you think participating in these community-based projects around housing issues maybe helped you think about HUD as a place where you might want to work?
Absolutely. I will honestly say that I don't think without those experiences in university that I would have gotten this job. The portfolio in which I work on, I'll just speak very briefly, it encompasses housing finance, rental assistance, increasing the supply of affordable housing in the United States, including elements of manufactured housing, as well as customer experience as it relates to how people who are, for example, seeking assisted housing or seeking affordable FHA loans interact with the department, and how we can improve on that customer experience. So with that in mind, there's a number of insights that I gathered from the work I did in your courses in regard to interfacing with members of marginalized communities, especially as they relate to notions of customer service and experience, how the history of redlining and other discriminatory practices in the housing finance industry have contributed to modern instances of race-based discrimination in housing and affordable housing issues, how we can increase the supply of affordable housing in light of some of those issues. So the experiences that I had in these projects were integral to my ability to not only get this job, but also want to work in this position, because I feel as if I am applying this notion of civil service in the same way that I was engaged civically in school. And I do not believe that without those experiences, I would have the same inclination to serve my country in this way and to seek to improve the lives of my fellow Americans. So that's.
Well, thank you so much, Alec. That's awesome. So I want to turn to Jim, a longtime friend and collaborator and fellow scholar of urban planning. So we've worked very closely with Jim's office, the Office of Resilience, since it was created. Your team has been a vital part of helping to shape the questions that we ask, how we work together to address policy, how we use data, what kind of data we can provide. So could you say a bit about what you think the value is of entities like yours, the Resilience Office of the county, collaborating with academics and why that's important?
Thanks, Robin. It's a pleasure to join you, and thanks, Bob, for convening us again on third Thursday. And Alec, we're all very proud of what you're doing. It's a thrill to see you in a national level affecting policy. You know, like Alec, I was a student once, and I had the opportunity in law school to work in a community of Anacostia in Washington, D.C. under a Mellon Foundation fellowship. And I really felt that exercise and what I took away from it is affected the way I think about the relationship that should exist between universities and public policy entities at any level of government. But as I moved through my career and came here to Miami-Dade to help set up the Office of Resilience, we had the pleasure of creating that in partnership with the cities of Miami and Miami Beach. And it was our Resilient 305 collaborative network for resilience. And we worked with our universities, with Florida International University, Miami-Dade College, to create that kind of ongoing relationship with the universities and the local governments, not just the county, but all the local governments, to get that symbiotic sharing of information that you both have described so well. Specific to our office, working directly with Mayor Danielle Levine Cava, we are always focused on having the data available to drive the right policy decisions. You know, the age-old axiom about let's not argue about the data, let's agree on that, and then let's decide what are the values and outcomes that we want to reach. And I think having the university be part of the way we get data and having it in the communities the way you described it helps verify something that maybe the county could say also independently, but it frankly might not be received the same way in the community. So it's a relationship which is excellent for the work we do. We can advise the mayor and the county commission based on data and research. And you know, the side benefit of having all of our universities' faculty, the students, the alumni, you know, they are in many cases, you know, the ground troops on resilience questions in our county, not just in their educational positions, but as participants in a large urban county. So we think it's got so many dividends. We will push it forward and grow with it.
Thanks, Jim. And I know that, you know, as you've been doing all of your work and formulating new policy solutions, whether it's around sea level rise or extreme heat, you are also deeply engaged in community-based work. And so I'm just wondering, both in your capacity as the Chief Resilience Officer for the county, but also as the president of the Florida Civic Advance Board, what strategies do you think we can use collectively, and universities in particular can use, to ramp up this sense of civic mindedness, both among our populations and also for universities among our students?
Well, I think this is a situation where, you know, you mentioned the geography of vulnerability. We tend to think about that, and we need to, in an historical concept. But the geography of vulnerability that challenges the programs we're responsible for at our office is the future geography. It's a geography that sees the status quo changing because of global warming, the impacts it has on extreme heat, on sea level rise, ultimately on groundwater, how it affects storm events, It's really far-reaching, and because of science and because of our ability to project data, to extrapolate data, we can actually create scenarios around, say, 2040 and 2070. That's great, but to engage people in a meaningful way about those future geographies requires, some unique skills. It's not just about putting the data on a map. It's about storytelling and engaging the members with their real life experiences, say at a time when we have a king tide event that is flooding the street on a sunny day, and they have an obvious question, well, why is that happening? And it's saltwater, right? So, or groundwater is affecting some of our septic tanks that used to operate perfectly fine. So we need to combine the storytelling of the community with our increasing ability to project the data into the new geography of vulnerability that we're going to be living with. And that's so much you and I, Robin, but those students, they're the ones that are going to have to really deal with these changes.
Great, thanks so much. And I know, Bob, you wanted to turn it over to questions and comments from the audience, so I will turn it over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Robin. Excellent presentation and discussion. I would just note that the Florida Civic Advance is going to convene next week. Civic centers from the private universities and the two public systems across the state to start a conversation about how we can get more civic minded in our work and connect and collaborate. So thank you for that. So in terms of questions, Ingrid has a question that she's interested in knowing how community champions were recruited and engaged during the process. Can you help respond? And Ingrid, if you want to add anything more to your question, you can unmute. So.
Yeah, so I'll start, and then Ingrid, if you want to unmute or respond, go right ahead. So as I mentioned, whenever we start any project, we consult with community partners, and one of our longstanding community partners is Catalyst Miami. Catalyst Miami is an organization that was actually founded by our current mayor, Danielle Levine Cava, and is really an umbrella human services organization addressing a multitude of issues in our communities. And so I have worked with them on a number of different projects and also had them be a community partner in a number of different courses. And typically, if I'm teaching a new course, depending on what the theme is, I'll reach out to many longstanding partners and say, this is the theme of the course. These are the topics we'll be addressing. Do you, within your organization, I'll use Catalyst as an example, do you have any projects that you're working on where you think it would be valuable for students to be engaged with you to help build capacity around your work? And so for the climate gentrification project, Catalyst Miami was already a partner on the research end of the project. And so in doing the oral histories, they thought the best division within that large umbrella organization was the Overtown Community Champions. So it was an entity that existed within Catalyst Miami. And it is an entity that focuses on understanding the history of Overtown, the variety of ways in which urban planning has impacted that community, most notably through the construction of I-95 that tore through the heart of Overtown, and what kinds of strategies they can put in place as effective grassroots advocates. So that's how the community partner was chosen. I should say on this climate gentrification project, we're working with community partners in Overtown, Little Havana, Allapattah, Little Haiti, and Liberty City. And so, as Alec mentioned, we did these bi-weekly meetings throughout the course of the semester with the Overtown Community Champions as a group. But then they helped recruit the people who would be part of the oral histories. Those oral histories now reside in the University of Miami Special Collections oral history around housing and housing activism.
Beautiful. I mean, this whole report has been very exciting. I am not currently involved with a particular academic institution, and that gives a lot of heft to it. We have a project we're up in Pinellas County and have a small, very grassroots effort going on here with some community conversations. And so, we get a lot of people that are already engaged, and there are people we'd love to have more engaged, and it's just looking for ideas. We've reached out to the faith communities and other groups, and it's an interesting dilemma. Before I let you go, I do have one other question, and it sounds like I'm very curious about, and your whole faculty preparation or course sounds fantastic, but any strategies that you want to share about if you're not pulling them into a whole semester long program, how you can touch in with faculty, because we have projects that could go across all the disciplines, and it would be great. But any ideas?
Yeah, sure. So, right. I mean, it's a small cohort of faculty that are part of this formal Engaged Faculty Fellows program, but our staff in our office also will work with faculty on an individualized basis to help them develop a community-based component in their course. We will go into their class to talk with students about how to effectively do this work. And we also work very closely with our Butler Center for Service and Leadership. So they're on the student affairs side. We're on the faculty affairs side. But we often have community partners that will come to us and just say, I have this project. Are there any students who could work on it? So I mentioned our Civic Scholars program. So if we have community partners that come to us, we'll then send out the engagement opportunity to our Civic Scholars listserv to say, hey, are there any students who are interested in this? I had a community partner recently reach out to me who does work around promoting awareness of childhood sexual violence. And so she had a whole host of things that need to be done. So we'll then reach out to faculty in particular departments that are relevant. We'll work with the Butler Center to say what student organizations are relevant. So we kind of can serve as a clearinghouse to disperse those opportunities across the university with both faculty and students.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Abby Zabrowski had a hand raised, and you can unmute and we can see your, and I have one other question that was presented. So Abby.
Hey, awesome. Thank you so much, Bob. This one is mainly directed to Robin, but anyone else who has experience, let me know. I recently started at Florida Tech as their basically overseer of civic engagement. And I am so impressed by the amount of programs and initiatives that your office have launched. I'm just wondering, like, how long did it take for you to build your office to the point where it is now? And were there any, strategies or partnerships that really helped make your office and programs and basically engagement so successful, that other universities could potentially use to also have that same amount of success?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. So I see that Veronica Alvarez is on this call, and Veronica Alvarez was our first AmeriCorps Vista. And that is how we started the office. It was me and AmeriCorps Vista and AmeriCorps Public Ally. Hi, Veronica. And so the first thing that we did is we did a benchmarking study of 30 peer institutions to see what they were doing around civic engagement. So we looked at what their programs were. We looked at where we could find it, what their funding structures were, what kinds of courses they offered. And so we did this whole database of these 30 peer institutions. We then did a survey of all faculty across the university and asked them, are you doing community-based work in your scholarship? Are you doing community-based work in your teaching? If you are not, do you want to? If you want to, what barriers do you see? We worked with student government to do a similar series of focus groups with students to ask them, are you interested in community-based learning in your courses? What sorts of things would you like to see? How do you think it would benefit you? And then we analyzed all of that data. We found that over 92% of faculty were interested in doing this work, but A, didn't know how to do it, B, thought there were barriers to doing it, including tenure and promotion, and C, just felt like they needed guidance and didn't know where to start. And among students, about 95% of students wanted to see this work. So in essence, what we then did, we had a kind of steering committee of faculty and students, wrote up a report to the provost with all this data. We went and spoke at faculty meetings at every school and college presenting this data, and used peer pressure to encourage the provost to fund this work. I will say, again, we started very small. Me as a faculty member, Veronica, and Catherine Murdoch, who is our other AmeriCorps person, we got a commitment from the university to give us an operational budget. We then sought out outside funding, and what's enabled us to do a lot of our work is outside funding, it's grants. We are a very small team, so I only have 2 full-time staff people in my office. The rest of my team is made up of AmeriCorps staff. AmeriCorps is one of the most amazing programs you will ever find, because you get, really bright, vibrant, full-time staff people for not a lot of money because it's subsidized by the federal government. It's an incredible opportunity for them. Veronica is now a medical doctor and doing incredible work in our community. And we also have a lot of graduate students who are on our research teams. We have undergraduate students who are on our research teams. And so it's really being strategic and efficient with limited resources.
Okay, we have the one quick question. I think it will probably provide a quick answer. Who owns the data and oral histories, and what access is there to those from the community?
Sure. So I'll speak about the data first. All of the data that we use is publicly accessible data. The job that we do is we take that data, we clean the data, we process it, we digitize it, and we map it. So we get our data from a variety of sources. All of our online mapping tools have a technical document that shows you where our data comes from. The Schimberg Center at the University of Florida provides a lot of our housing data. The county provides a lot of our housing data. I mentioned that we work very closely with all of our municipal agencies to get data. So that is all publicly accessible. So what we do then is we do all the data cleaning, analyzing, processing, and mapping with our Institute for Data Science and Computing. The data itself is publicly accessible. The oral histories are also all publicly accessible. So this was a project and a process that Bea knows well, where we negotiated on our consent agreement for the oral histories with our community partners for almost a year to ensure that everybody was comfortable with the terms of those agreements. So the oral histories are all digital. So they reside in our special collections division at Libraries, but the people who do the oral histories also own them. So anybody has access to them. They have a copy of it. Our community partners have a copy of it, and they set the terms of how the oral histories can be used in a research capacity. So again, it's a link. Anybody can go to the Special Collections website, to the oral history section, and find these oral histories.
Okay, so we're a little over time, but I think this has been very excellent. And I'll just do a couple of quick plugs for the next couple of workshops that we're having. The next one is a workshop that will be an interactive workshop for an hour and a half, and it's going to be presented by a couple of experts, national experts, on storytelling and deepening conversations and putting differences on the table. Then in May, on the 18th, a Thursday, we're going to hear from the Collaboratory, formerly the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, and they're challenged to try and solve every problem in their region in 18 years. So stay tuned for that. Past webinars can be viewed off of our website. The website is there, membership benefits and application there. And by the way, root for Alec on Jeopardy tonight. He is competing, and you can watch the show, at least here in Tallahassee, is on at 7:30. And we're excited about that. And not only is he a scholar, he's a gentleman. So thank you all for participating in this, and we will see you next month at our workshop webinar, and really excellent piece. Thank you to all of the presenters, Robin, Alec, Jim. Thanks very much. So we're going to conclude this program. Thank you.